Yeah. Anyway, interesting. The media now, mainstream corporate media, seems to be tying itself up in knots about Ukraine. The Russians are winning. They look like they're decisively with winning in Donbass, and it could be over. I don't know. Like Biden seems all confused about it. Some parts of the Biden administration seem to want to back away, but yet Biden sent another $40 billion. According to maybe what I read, only $6 billion is actually going to go to Ukraine in terms of weapons. How do you see the Ukraine conflict playing out?
It's just extremely dangerous. It's the old Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So everybody's getting punched in the face now. And it's hard to, it's pretty clear. It's not pretty. It's that the Russian army is not going to be defeated by Ukraine. Okay.
Right.
And there's no chance of that, right? The American, barring two things, the Americans giving some kind of decisive intervention, which could mean some decisive weaponry, but I don't think there is decisive weaponry that the Russians can't overcome. Mm-hmm. The decisive conventional weaponry that the Russians can't overcome. Right. The artillery that they're giving to Ukraine is good artillery. The weapons that they're giving are good weapons. But even as the New York Times says, they don't know how to use them. You've got to be trained to use these things. They throw these things in there and they try to get them to the front and they put them in the hands of soldiers who aren't trained and they don't know how to use them. And the Russians just blow them up or take them, or they get put into the black market where they're sold.
Right.
Javelins are being sold for $30,000, $15,000 in Syria that are coming from Ukraine. So these weapons are going to end up in the hands of right-wing of jihadi forces in the Middle East and right-wing forces, fascist groups in Europe. I mean, this is crazy, and they know they don't really have a way of monitoring and what's going on with these weapons. So, and the Minister of Defense of Ukraine tweeted yesterday, with the weapons we already have been given, this is what the Minister of Defense of Ukraine said, we would have defeated any army in Europe, but we can't defeat the Russians. And he's right. In other words, Ukraine had, over the past 8 years, been supplied by NATO, been trained by NATO. They're a better army than they were in 2014. But the Russians are going to defeat the Ukrainian army. Now, it may take them a lot longer. The United States can make it go on longer by supplying a lot of weapons. But the Russians are withholding a certain level of force that they could be using to overwhelm the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian regime, the Kiev regime, and they still might come forward with that force, but they're being very methodical. They're grinding it down. They admit it. The Ukrainians admit it. So you have this bizarre situation where, unless the United States and NATO intervene directly, and then you've got, all they can do is prolong the war or widen it to make it into a world war that will end up nuclear very quickly. And they can't defeat the Russians. They can't make the Kiev regime defeat the Russians. They could intervene in the war in a way that'll make it go on forever, or widen it. Not forever, because, well, forever in a certain sense. Anyway, my point is, we're in a situation, and and as you say, they're incoherent about what they want to do. They will, this is one of these things, again, you see statements where the same statement, the same article in the paper will demonstrate that the Russians are methodically overwhelming the Ukrainian army, and at the same time imply that the Russians are losing, the Ukrainians are winning. And if only we get more weapons, or they're really, it's just a temporary thing. And so there's this, they want to believe. What happened, I think, at the beginning of this, I think a lot of people, those who are sympathetic to the Russians and those who are sympathetic to Ukraine, were thinking this is going to be over in a couple of days, but it wasn't, and that led the narrative managers in the West to say, let's present this as Ukraine is winning. So they presented it as Ukraine is winning, and they constructed this whole thing, and they repeat everything that the Kiev says as fact, and they tell you nothing really, as far as they can, about what's going on, what's being said or done on the Russian side. So they got to believe their own narrative. the congressional delegations, Republican and Democrat, went over there and said, we're on your side. We're here. We're in it to win it. We're going to stay with you to the end. They got on television in the United States. There's no off-ramp. We have to defeat the Russians, because they really believed, they started to believe that they could and that they would. So now they're in a situation rhetorically where if the Russians, if Ukraine cedes to the Russians, which they're going to have to do, the Donbas republics are going to be independent. Crimea is not going back to Ukraine. And if that doesn't happen, the war is going to continue. And the Russians will continue it until they get that to happen. And not only that, now they've created a situation for themselves that's worse, because the longer they extend this, the Russians come in, people, again, Americans don't realize this, but there's a lot of people and regions in Ukraine that don't like the fascist regime in Kiev. So the Kherson region and there's another region, and Odessa, these regions now, when they become occupied by the Russian forces they say, we don't want to go back. We don't want to go back to Kiev, and not only do they not want to go back to Kiev, but if the Kiev regime takes us over again, they're going to come. Those fascists are going to come in and slaughter us, and they will, because we gave you, we supported you. So the Russians now are going to be coming to the quote unquote negotiation table, saying, "Oh, by the way, it's not just Donetsk and Lugansk; it's Kherson, it's Odessa, it's because those regimes, we want them to have a referendum on what they want to be able to do, and because it would be a bad thing in every way for the Russians having gone into those places and giving them the hope that they could break away from Kiev, which would and then leave there and have them be put in a deadly fashion back under the Kiev regime would be very good. So this has gotten worse for Ukraine's going to lose more territory now because it's gone on forever. So what the United States is doing is, and the West is doing, is by pretending that the Russians did this in an unprovoked way. It was just Putin in some kind of insanity. Putin, he wanted to be new Tsar Nicholas or Tsar Peter, or he wants to reconstruct the Soviet Union, and instead of looking at what's been happening over the past 8 years and what happened with the Maidan coup and what happened with the Nazification, which it has been in Ukraine over 8 years, they just dreamed up this, and what happened with the Minsk agreement. So I don't know where this is going to go, because it's going to be, as I said in my article, Ukraine negotiation, but the only negotiations here are really going to be terms of surrender. One side or the other is going to win, and one side is going to lose. Either the Russians, the DPR, the Donbas republics will be independent, Crimea will be Russian, and Kiev will be neutral, or the Russians will slink away and defeat, and none of that will happen. So, and we'll know who wins and who loses on that basis, or it'll go on forever, which is a win for nobody. But, this is, and it's the West and the U.S. have put themselves in a situation. This is the point. They're showing their weakness, not their strength. They're showing that they're threatening, they're bullying. We're going to give you arms. We're going to give you this. Well, what Russians are, okay, you're giving them arms. We're still winning. What else are you going to do? It's the predicament of the bully. Well, what's your other punch? What are you going to do? And people are, and the Europeans certainly, well, we're going to sanction you to hell. Oh, yeah, look who's going to hell with the sanctions. Yeah. So the European states are going to be, that's going to start breaking up the consensus. It is breaking up of European states for this, because there's going to be social. Polish people are being told to go forage in the woods for fuel, for wood to burn. This is going back to hunter-gathering in order to support NATO in Ukraine. So what's going to happen? This is going to be social and political upheaval in European countries. And, this is an existential issue for Russia, and they're going to do this. And they told you listen to them. Don't invent what's going on in Putin's head. You just listen to what he says for 8 years. And now I don't know what's going to happen, because there are, as you say, there are different blocks of people in the Biden administration. First of all, Biden is not in control of anything, including his own mind, so that's a big problem. Yeah. And you have a group of neocons who are willing to go to the mat for this, and that means nuclear war. That means World War III. So that's not it's not outside the realm of possibility at all. It's about 30% possibility maybe. So because if that doesn't happen, then the United States and NATO is clearly going to lose.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't want to predict. I think the likelihood is, but I don't know how long it's going to take. It's always, the Russians are going to break through. The Russians are going to break. They look like they're winning that war steadily in Donbass. But is there a dramatic breakthrough coming that's going to collapse the Ukrainian army in such a way that they're going to have to say, okay, we give up? That may happen in next week. It may happen in next month. It may happen in 3 months. People are talking about August. But this is it's going to happen at some point, unless NATO and the U.S. intervene directly.
Right. And it's obviously a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia, but it's also a broader proxy war between U.S. imperialism and the global South, to some extent. Like, I have an activist acquaintance who was in Nicaragua for like a leftist conference, Latin American leftist, and the presenter from RT got on, and there were wild cheers, people crying, Putin, Putin, not the support for Putin per se, but support for Russia pushing the empire. So it's, in a way, it's like U.S. hegemony is eroding, not quite totally gone yet, but eroding. And the sanctions are kind of insane. They're massively backfiring. I think there was some thought that the Russian state would collapse. There'd be a run on the ruble. That clearly didn't happen. Russia is in a stronger position than a lot of people say, than a lot of people originally thought would happen. And people like Michael Hudson or Pepe Escobar talk about a multipolar world is emerging. Do you think there's something to this?
Oh, absolutely. Look, this says whatever the proximate cause of this was, the threat from NATO and from a NATO-ized Ukraine, the Russian, and this is what happens, military interventions do change reality, and they have effects that can change the world, and this is changing the world.
Right.
It's not going back. First of all, the sanctions regime and everything that's been done has demonstrated that the United States, as I said, the idea that the sanctions were going to persuade Russia not to withdraw is exactly the opposite. They're confirming to Russia why they're doing what they're doing, because the sanctions, the ability of the United States to destroy and to try to destroy and to destroy other economies, to prevent people from trading with each other, to steal the wealth, the sovereign wealth of other countries, is the problem, is a huge part of the problem, and that has to change. So, and what this is demonstrating that to the whole world, the world isn't going to go back, unless the United States defeats Russia in some way. How that would happen, I have no idea. The world isn't going to go back to a regime in which the United States controls the entire economy of the world and is able to steal every country's money the way it's doing now. Everybody knows this is not a Russian thing. Anybody who can see this, capitalists can see this, rich oligarchs and other in the global South, not good guys, but they're not American, so they know, and countries in the global South, countries outside Western Europe, and even Western Europe countries, the Americans are saying to people, we're going to sanction you. We're not going to let you. We're not going to trade with Russia. We're not going to you trade with Russia. We're going to sanction you if you trade with Russia. We're taking you if you trade with someone who trades with Russia. I mean, this kind of stuff. You can't have an economy like this, a global economy.
Yeah.
And this is part of what, and the Nicaraguans and the Cubans and the Venezuelans. Oh, you with me?
I'm here. You were talking about the global South, in fact, on Nicaragua, Venezuela, Bolivia. They're kind of cheering on a Russian victory.
Yeah, well, the Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela, they know that this is changing the world, that this is changing the structure of the world economy, not just the world politics, but it's going to move from a unipolar world to a multipolar world. Right. And the Americans themselves, in my article on the Battle of Ukraine and the war it's a part of, I have a clip from the guy who's the national security advisor for Latin America, saying what we're doing in Russia is about Ukraine, is about Venezuela and Nicaragua and Cuba. This is about our ability to control the world economically and as well as politically and militarily. So they know that. And
Right.
this is, my point is, the Russians are a very imperfect actor in this oligarchic capitalist country. But their actions are, and the Chinese see it, and the Venezuelans and Cubans and Nicaraguans see it. What's happening here goes beyond what's happening in Ukraine. It's about the structure of the world social economy, of the world political economy. And that's now over. The old political economy is now over. We don't know what's coming, okay?
Right.
But, and people like Michael Hudson makes the point that this is a war against Germany as much as against Russia, because what they're trying to do is prevent Europe from aligning and integrating economically with the European landmass, the Eurasian landmass, and with Russia. And that's what they're looking for. And they're looking to maintain, the United States is looking to maintain unipolar control of the world's political economy, as well as the world militarily. It's not going to be able to do that anyway. The long-term evolution of that was away from that. But this war is now highlighting all the reasons why that's impossible. And the United States, I don't know how they think they can get that back. They could get India and every country in the global south who's not a poodle like the Europeans are, and even the Europeans, the Germans, to go along with a political, the structure of a world political economy in which the United States has the right to determine who trades with whom, whether or not you get to take your money home, or we're going to keep it and give it to somebody else, which is what they're threatening to do with Russia's money, and give it to Ukraine. So, this is something that can't happen. You can't isolate the largest country in the world, Russia, which has enormous amounts of essential commodities, wheat, oil, precious metals, rare metals, and noble gas, things that are absolutely necessary. You can't isolate that, and you can't, the idea they had that they could somehow, the United States has enough power in terms of the economic power in the world to isolate Russia. They're the ones who are going to suffer, not everybody else in the world. It's just not going to happen. Doesn't happen that way. It's not happening that way. So what the United States is doing is, by being so adamantly aggressive about this, they're really demonstrating their own ultimate weakness, which people are going to find a way to undermine them. And this is doing that. And so we don't know what's coming, but it's going to be a new world. There is a new world order that's in the process of being formed.
Right. Interesting time to be alive. Yeah. The multipolar world won't be socialist, but it will make class struggles so much easier in some parts of the world. Like I can see the pink tide countries in Latin America becoming red tide, and so on. It'll make it easier in some extent. Be a healthier world.
I don't know. I mean, look, at least this, what it's doing is giving room for different countries to develop. At least on the surface, it seems that prima facie that's what it will do. It will give rooms for countries who call themselves socialists, like China, who have socialist tendencies like Nicaragua and Venezuela, and call themselves socialists like Cuba and China. It will give them room to develop unimpeded by this diktat of one nation that controls the world's political economy. I mean, you have to do away with these, embargoes and sanctions and the siege warfare against any country that the United States doesn't like. Whether it calls itself socialist or communist, or the United States did fine with China for a long time until they got a little too powerful. So this is, it's opening up the space of development in the world, and Russia and China don't go around the world preaching to everybody. They don't act like they're the parent or they're the teacher in the classroom, and you guys are all, have to listen to us, and we're giving you the lessons of the world, and we're going to punish you if you don't obey our rules and the rules of, morality that we, some of those are good rules of morality, some of them are not. But the United States is not in that position in the world. It is, it has been, and it wants to be, but it's not going to be any longer. There's no more teacher, there's no more parent. This is a world that's going to be different, and we'll have to see. I don't know what it's going to be, but that's what the United States doesn't want to have happen. They want to maintain the control that they have now, and be able essentially to steer and prevent development in the ways that they want.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, there's some people on the left who say that like socialists of the left shouldn't take a side, that both Russia and the US are capitalist, imperialist countries. I disagree with their narrative, but it's very common in some parts of the left, especially the Facebook left. I disagree with that. Yeah, Russia may be capitalist. I don't see Russia as imperialist. Doesn't fit Lenin's theory of imperialism, following finance capital, for one thing. Big thing is Syria, the Syrian civil war in 2014. Russia intervened and basically preserved the Assad government. I think it's good that they did. Not that I support Assad a lot, but it would have been terrific instability in Central Asia. And also, of course, Russia has a naval base in Latakia. But Russia had, for interests of their own, kind of prevented Syria from going the way of Libya or Iraq or so many other places. So I disagree with that now. What would you say about that?
Yeah, no, I don't think Russia or China fit the description of imperialist countries, according to my understanding of that from Marx and Lenin. And we all, Marxists and socialists and leftists have to be a little bit, humble about what we know or don't know, or what proclamations we can make. But and the world is a mess, and I agree with you. I wrote articles about Syria. Syria interrupted. At the time, and I went into this whole thing. This trying to portray this as Russian aggression or Russian imperialism. This is nonsense. This is reactionary. This is Zionism and American imperialism. Trying to destroy the Syrian state like they destroyed the Iraqi state and the Libyan state and turn them into weak, divided, chaotic states. Okay, and the thing is that since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And everybody who's called themselves a socialist or Marxist has to confront what happened there, and it's not easy. And we don't have, we've got to be a little bit humble about this. It was defeated, but not militarily. But since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, until Syria in 2014, the United States was able to do whatever the hell it wanted, and the Russians went along with it. They went along with Yugoslavia, which they hated. They voted in favor of in the UN for Libya, which anybody should have seen was an imperialist intervention. Okay, and it was at that moment in Syria, 2012.
I can hear you now. Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, it was at that moment in Syria in 2012-13 that Russia stepped in militarily, and this is, I said that at the time. This is the first time since the dissolution of the Soviet Union that any country has put its military in the way of the United States program in Syria. And they stepped in militarily. And they, first of all, undermined Obama was ready to go into Syria, but it was not only the Russians, there was a worldwide denunciation of that. The British Parliament voted against it. So people were fed up with these interventions. But the Russians also stepped in militarily. And I'll say this, it's very important to recognize, everybody should always remember this. The Russian military intervention in Syria came only after the United States, the Obama administration, announced that it was going to attack the Syrian army. And that's when Syria said to Russia, we need you to come in, and Russia did. And it's a good thing they did. They prevented ISIS from taking over the damn country, and the jihadis from taking over the country. They prevented what happened in Libya from happening in Syria. That's what happened. But it was a stunning thing for the United States to say, well, we can't really, because the Russians are there. The Russians have prevented us from doing what we want. It's not over yet in Syria. It's not over. And the Russians haven't chased the Americans out of Syria. They're still there.
U.S. is occupied
the country. But they interrupted the American game with military action.
Right.
And since then, they stood up at 2014. They wouldn't allow the Donbas republics to be defeated. And between now and then, they tried to do this diplomatically with the Minsk agreements, but now they're saying, we're going to aggressively, we're going to offensively take since you wouldn't solve this diplomatically, we're going to take the offensive that we need, a counteroffensive against your offense. You're building up NATO in Ukraine and your imminent invasion of the Donbass, which they have a case was about to happen. So this is not revolutionary socialist politics, but it's great power politics in which the stakes are the imperialist power here and the aggressive power here clearly over the course of 20 years is the United States and NATO.
Right.
And the Russians are acting in a kind of counteroffensive way. And leftists liberaloid leftists especially like the martyrs. They like the Allende's who get shot, but when you win, you win because Allende would have won if maybe he had preemptively acted against the military. He had gone, people would have gotten killed.
Right.
Hands would get dirty. You don't win a fight like this without getting dirty hands. So the Russians could have stayed back and waited for the Kiev to attack Donbass and then come in. Everybody said, no.
Okay.
The Russians could have stayed back and let Kiev attack Donbass and then come in. And then all the leftists would say, okay, now they're okay. Now we can feel better about supporting that because they didn't act offensively. Sometimes you have to act offensively. And sometimes defense is not aggression. It's a counter offensive.
Yeah.
So, why should Donbass and the Russians have waited to be in a weaker position to do it? If Ukraine was going to attack Donbass, and what the Russians did is not only legitimate but legal in terms of UN law, international law. But look, this is what the stakes here are not imperialism. Well, the imperialism here is the American and NATO imperialism. There's no Russia may become an imperialist country, China may become an imperialist country, who knows? But right now the stakes are whether American imperialism is going to run the world or not. And anybody who doesn't understand that is neither a Marxist or a socialist or that's not the point. It's really that those are the stakes, and we have to recognize that.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, as I mentioned, the sanctions are badly backfiring, particularly European countries, particularly in the global south. Michael Hudson had an interesting article where he talked about possibility of famine in Africa and other areas. Do you think there's anything to the Great Reset theory of the World Economic Forum? There's some more libertarian, some leftists. Do you think this ties in with a Great Reset depopulation agenda, or do you think this is too much of a conspiracy theory?
Well, I've delved terribly deeply into the Great Reset, but I mean, they have programs, they have wishes. Clearly the COVID vaccine program, this was a worldwide program that was coordinated around the world, okay? And that, they were able to get away with things on it's public health. So, suddenly this trumps everything, okay? And I think there are people, the Klaus Schwab there are people who have grandiose schemes for how to run the world, and they have power to put a lot of that into action. I think that's still largely constrained or largely entwined in a way with national political. There's still the nation state, and there's still political structures. And precisely one of the things they want to do is find ways of avoiding the constraints that come from the nation state on these grandiose schemes. I think that's true. And what we've seen in the developments in Europe, this is one of the things. There's a capitalist globalization effort, which has elements of it that a lot of leftists are going to like and may think has something to do with what leftists want to do with overcoming the nation state. But really what it's about in the capitalist globalization is the opposite of proletarian internationalism. And people have to be clear about that. They're going to take the woke elements of, we want everybody to be anti-racist, so that's what this is about, or we want everybody to have women's rights, so that's what this is about. We want climate change, so that's what this is about. Okay, but what it was about ultimately was the EU and was overcoming the strong social democratic labor movements and labor-based parties in the nation states of Europe, in France and in Germany, and overcoming that and finding a way of avoiding and getting around the constraints that those things put on capital. It's really about making it easier to fire people and to fire labor, okay, and making it easier to increase the concentration of wealth without putting the brakes on it. So this was a campaign against social democracy in Europe, against this political economy of social democracy, and it demonstrated the ultimate weakness of social democracy in that it didn't do away with the class structure, and therefore the ruling class found a way around to come back. So what you have is, this is the ruling class having meetings and telling you what it wants to do with the world and what it thinks is a great thing to do, and presenting it as, this is just progress. This is just the route for progress in the world is, whatever Klaus Schwab dreams up. But they get away with a lot of it. So I think it should be paid attention to. I think it's a real factor, but I think it doesn't, what we have to do is build up mass political movements on our own political territory to demand structures that we can demand within the boundaries of the nation state, really, and insofar as we can. And, but you have to not, it's not science fiction. And we've lost the ability to, build mass movements of political strength in the United States, in individual nations. Again, we got to be storming the Capitol.
Right.
They can't stop that. Klaus Schwab can't stop you if you're storming the Capitol.
Right.
I mean, that's something outside that realm of discourse.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. The European countries, particularly the European Social Democratic parties, are going along. Olaf Scholz in Germany, they're completely going along with this. It's like they're cutting their own throat. Really, it's kind of insane.
They've been captured by the idea that this is the road to progress. And really, it's completely anti-populist. It's elitist in the highest sense. We all know these people, these dirty workers and stupid workers and racist workers. We have to find a way of getting around their bad attitudes and rearrange the world in a way that's going to be more, quote unquote, progressive.
Right. How would you say, just briefly, mass socialist leftist movement could be built in the U.S.? Around a socialist organization or around unions or something? How would you say good way? Probably $6 million question there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew that. Yeah.
It has to be built on the working class. I mean, the Amazon union is a great example. A self-directed union organizing effort that was actually ignored or shunned by the union bureaucracy. This is an enormous problem in this country. Because the union, whatever there is left of a labor movement, is under the domination of the Democratic Party. The labor bureaucracy is under the domination of the Democratic Party. We have a left ideological space, which is dominated completely by identity politics. Identity politics can and will destroy every left movement in the United States today.
Yeah.
This is just, there's a thing that's I'll propose a scheme that I think I've been thinking about. The fight against Jim Crow in the United States. Part of the problem is the fight against Jim Crow racism in the United States. Ultimately, and I'm going to say, Jim Crow was destroyed very quickly at a certain point. It was at a point at which mass movement developed, absolutely. Armed movements of black people developed. It was a crucial part of it. Anybody thinks it wasn't is kidding themselves. Martin Luther King's home was an arsenal of weapons, and he applied for a carry permit. Robert Williams, Negroes with Guns, said the only time that the authorities in the South, the police authorities, started to act was after and as a direct result of the fact that we were armed. And what put an end quickly to Jim Crow in the U.S. were the uprisings in Newark and the fact that there were armed groups, the Panthers. This was no longer. There was an uprising around the country that it was both mass militant, nonviolent movements and armed movements. At a certain point, the dominant sectors of the ruling class said, we got to put an end to Jim Crow. And then they put an end to Jim Crow quickly. And whatever the southern racist sectors of the ruling class wanted, or the southern racist populace, which was racist, wanted, there was going to be an end to Jim Crow. We're going to have programs. We're going to put an end to this. We're going to create a black middle class, which they did. Okay, so to a certain extent, didn't really ameliorate the lives of black people in general, but in fact the opposite. But they created a black middle class and ideologically created a space. So you have to realize the ruling class got to the point where they said, the dominant sector, that mode of division, that racism, that Jim Crow, which was a way of dividing the working class for a long time in the United States, we have to put an end to. We have to define, but they found other ways to divide the working class. The other way they found to divide the working class now is wokeism. So now you have, perfectly reasonable and movements for equal rights of women, equal rights of gays, which were absolutely to be commended and to be supported and wonderful. But the ruling class found a way of turning that into a whole ideological apparatus that they can use to divide the working class, and into a kind of and that's what's happened to a great extent, and it's very difficult to deal with. So that's one of the major things within the quote unquote left that's going to, and they can use it very easily. You can destroy a left movement with one person, with two people making complaints. You can destroy it completely, and because the fundamental notion of organizing around material interests, not around attitudes, but around material interests in the capitalist structure of production and of the capitalist political economy, who is in a position of what material. I'm fighting for your material interest. I want you to have health care. You have stupid ideas in your head. I don't like the stupid ideas. I'll tell you they're stupid, but I'm going to fight with you for health care. I'm going to fight with you for job security. I'm going to fight with you for a living wage. I'm going to fight for you for housing. You want to fight with me for that? You think I'm black? You don't want to fight with me? That's your problem. Then you're going to problem. I'm gay. You don't want to fight with me? That's your problem. That's a problem for the workers. But it's easy to say. You see what you're doing here? They're using you to prevent us from getting homes, housing, to prevent us from getting health care. Now, let's get together and fight for health care. Wait a minute. You don't like me because I'm black? You don't like me? You said something that makes me think I'm uncomfortable. Wait. This is going to go on. This goes on forever. So, because the priority of material interest has disappeared almost entirely, but some leftists are bringing it back, but the priority of material interest versus attitudes. First, I've got to find your attitude, what attitude you have towards people. And if you have attitudes that are bad, then I don't want to work with you. So, that's a problem. So I don't know. That's the major thing. Plus, this is as you say, they have the ideological apparatus of the world in a very powerful way, and I don't know. It's going to be very hard. It has to be based on working class, on material interests, on we need to control the capital wealth of society. That's what socialism is about. It's about we need to control the capital wealth of society. Racism, sexism are impediments to that. They historically have been impediments because they divide the working class. What are the things now that are preventing the working class from working in unity to take control of the capital wealth of society? It's not about socialism isn't about changing people's minds about nasty things. It's about, fundamentally, are we taking control of the capital wealth of society? Do we have a program for that?
Right. Interesting. Yeah, right. Like this cancel culture, I think, can be very destructive. I think Glenn Greenwald is like one of the best journalists we have, but he was on Tucker Carlson a couple times, how everybody's supposed to hate him.